I want to share something with you as I'm going through this issue that I talked about in the previous video. This issue that's not been resolved regarding, my suffering that I experienced growing up. It's an aspect of the issue of my suffering that has not been resolved, and I spoke about it in the other video. As I'm sitting here and doing, I walked you through the dreams that I was having. I walked you through the thing that God's dealing with me on right now, giving me this cold, because I decided to go out and take control of something by the work of my own hands. When he was telling me to trust in him, he was telling me to stay with him. I did not resist, or I resisted to a certain point, but I didn't endure until my choice was made known. I didn't endure and make sure that I remained single-minded to him. So here's the thing that he's dealing with, that he's showing me right now, because this is a really difficult thing. When you're dealing with childhood trauma, it is incredibly difficult to understand where God is coming from and to be built through that. It's extremely difficult. And we have, not had any good shepherds helping us to understand. Any good shepherds who are actually living out what Jesus taught in the Word so that they have a testimony to share with us. I mean, what good is mental health? Obviously no good at all, because it's not helping anybody. Our condition is not getting better, it's getting worse. So here's what I discovered in sitting down and taking this up with God, because I want you to understand my process with him so that you can understand what you need to do, because there were times in my journaling where I was feeling angry, and I was telling him, you tell earthly fathers, you tell human fathers not to frustrate their children, but and understand my heart. I was not coming at this from an evil, challenging God, okay? Truly wanting to know. So you have to understand my heart. If you're challenging and you're testing and speaking against him, that's a totally different thing. But in my heart, what I was saying, I was standing on his word and telling him, this is, you tell human fathers not to frustrate their children. But I could not catch a break growing up. The attack was relentless. The abuse was relentless. The punishment was relentless for simply being human, or if my dad was having a bad day. It was relentless. There was no escaping that. I could not escape. Why did you frustrate me? Why did you get to why did it get to this point? Help me understand from your perspective what you were doing and what you're doing now. Now let me tell you that the way that he told me what he's doing now. He began to remind me of Friday night when I heard that sound and I started to have that feeling that I couldn't control it. And I was reading the word and I was leaning into him. But if I'm being honest, what I felt in my heart is if he doesn't do something about this, at a certain point, I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to do something about it. That's what was in my heart. I know that looking at it. And I know that looking at what I did, what I ended up doing. He wasn't doing it in my timeline, and so I got in my car and I went and looked for the sound. And he handed me over to this cold because I made a commitment that I was going to endure, that I was going to trust him to deal with it. And I did that with knowledge. What was I doing without knowledge? Without knowledge, as a child, I was reminding him, I prayed to you. I prayed that you would send me to live with my mom. I prayed that you would take my dad. These are the things I prayed when I was a kid. I prayed that you would rescue me, and you didn't do it. It's not as though I didn't turn to you, but I did the same thing that I did the same thing unknowingly then that I did knowingly on Friday night. And if I did it knowingly on Friday night as an adult, how much worse do you think I did it unknowingly as a child? And the thing that he's telling me is that I have to be single-minded in my trust of him. This is hard stuff, you guys. I mean, it's really hard because you think of a child. I mean, why is he holding a child to that standard? Because he's God. Because he knows what he's doing. And it requires us to believe that. And, I know that I'm probably going to get people who are going to say that I'm teaching a destructive teaching, that children aren't responsible for anything. Well, that's not what God teaches. Children are responsible, but also God didn't hand me over to abuse because I didn't turn to him. He knows what he's doing with all of that. He has known what he's doing with all of it. He also didn't hand Job over to all of the things that he put on Job because of his sin, because Job was identified as blameless. But he knows what he's doing with Job. And so I can multiply my words all day. I can lean on my own understanding. But at the end of the day, when God finally did respond to Job, look what he said. Who is this who obscures my plans with words without knowledge? He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's been doing. He knows what he did during my childhood. He knows what he's teaching me today about it, how I need to be single-minded. He knows that that understanding and obedience is required in my covenant. He has a much larger perspective than I do. My perspective mostly has to do with, usually, right now. I have to work to try to broaden my perspective. I have to bring intentionality to doing that. The other thing that he's teaching me is what's required. And I remember this from the early days when he was healing me, and he would have me, would convict me of certain sins and have me writing about that and examining myself and repenting. In order for that to break, in order for that stronghold to break and that spirit to come out, we have to make sure that we are making our choice clear, that we are proving our choice. So I could have been right on the cusp, the other night, on Friday night, I could have been right on the cusp. Any minute now, that's going to break. But, I gave up. I did not make my choice known. I was living in a double-minded way. I made a decision to be double-minded and to not trust that God will deal with this the way that he sees fit. And in the meantime, I got to go put on my armor. I got to take up my shield. I got to take up my sword. I got to resist the devil and he will flee. To be honest, that music only comes on from like about 11 o'clock until probably 1 o'clock. And I mean, that's just so inconsiderate. It infuriates me. It makes me mad that someone would do that. No clue where it's coming from, but it makes me mad that someone would do that. I mean, I don't know. There's probably children somewhere who are being affected by that. Probably not just me. And I can't stand inconsiderate people like that. But the bottom line is, I mean, really, in comparison to what God could, like a situation he could put me in, it could happen every night. It could happen for several hours. This happens for a couple hours, So it's not like he's immersing me in more distress or grief than he has to give me. So I have to look at the mercy in that too. He's giving me an opportunity to have a stronghold broken off of me. He's teaching me what is required in order for me to fulfill my covenant and in order for me to be healed. First, healed of this affliction. Second, healed of my condition. Do you see the parallel that he uses between, as he's using that word healed synonymously with salvation? If we're not dealing with these things, we're not dealing with our traumas and we just decided that we supposedly forgave someone, which is baloney, by the way. I've worked with a lot of people who've claimed that they were not healed. They keep relenting the same darn thing, never looking at themselves. They keep ending up in the same darn situations, reenacting the same traumas, the same idolatry. These things are required in our covenant with God. It is required that we are learning the lessons that he has intended for us to learn. And it is important for me to learn how to be single-minded, even though I didn't know when I was a child. He will use those situations in order to teach me now. He's going to use situations in order to speak parable to you. So pay attention. I'm really grateful. I have an opportunity to be healed of this. This has been something that has affected my life for a very long time. And honestly, I live in a very, very quiet little mountain town, so I don't deal with noises and sounds like that. These things used to plague me. I would feel like I was in a prison inside of myself because there was no healing. There was no outlet for healing. So the other thing that I want to tell you is he's only going to he's going to raise what needs to be healed at a given time. And now I know the things that I need to do. When you're stuck in that stronghold, you start feeling like you're imprisoned. You start thinking that things need to go a particular way. God needs to do things in a particular way. That's part of what I was doing when I was a kid, praying for specific things. But now I know there are other things that I can do to protect myself from spiraling out of control. So I just want to encourage you as you're doing your work. This is how it goes. It's not pretty. But I know that I'm going to feel peace. I know that this is going to become a part of myself of my soul that is integrated, that I will have an integrated understanding of the posture that I need to take in order to be free. And isn't that the truth? That's the only way that we can be free is by being single-minded. No one who's double-minded is going to be free. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.